Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're cracking open the world of ethical hacking.
hmm
Think of it as sort of a backstage pass to how the internet's first responders work.
Exactly. At its core, ethical hacking is really about, well, intentionally testing the defenses of computer systems, networks.
Right.
But these aren't malicious attacks. That's key. They're authorized attempts
Authorize. Yeah.
to find vulnerabilities, before the real threats do. We're talking skilled professionals
Hmm.
using maybe the same techniques as malicious hackers,
Okay.
but with permission and a very clear goal:
Yeah.
make things more secure.
So it's really a proactive approach then, isn't it?
Definitely.
Instead of just waiting around for something bad to happen, a breach or whatever, these ethical hackers are actively looking for weak spots.
They are.
They're the ones doing penetration tests, digging into vulnerability assessments, analyzing risks, all to help organizations build stronger digital fortresses.
Yeah, it's almost like hiring someone to try and break into your house, right? So you know where to upgrade the locks.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy, actually, and it really highlights the fundamental difference, what we call white hat versus black hat hackers.
Right. The good guys and the bad guys, basically.
Pretty much, the intent is completely different. White hats are the ethical hackers we're discussing. They operate legally with permission, aiming to improve security.
Oh, okay.
Black hats, well, they're the ones acting maliciously for personal gain, maybe, or just to cause chaos and harm.
And then there's that sort of middle ground, the gray hats.
Ah, yes, the gray hat hackers. It's an interesting area and honestly often debated.
How so?
Well, these are folks who might poke around the systems, maybe without explicit permission.
Uh-oh.
Exactly. But their intentions aren't necessarily destructive. Maybe they find a vulnerability and want to report it, sometimes, maybe too publicly.
But still, no permission. That sounds risky.
It is, as the experts in our sources really stress, even if you don't mean harm, accessing systems without authorization. It carries significant legal and ethical weight, a very risky path.
Definitely not something to just try out.
Absolutely not. So why should this matter to you, listening?
Yeah. What's the takeaway?
Well, ethical hacking is fundamentally the cornerstone of proactive security. By finding and fixing those vulnerabilities before they get exploited.
They're preventing the big problems.
Exactly. They're directly involved in preventing data breaches, which, as we know, can have huge consequences for everyone. Individuals, companies.
Oh, yeah. Think about the fallout from a major data breach. The financial losses alone can be staggering.
Huge.
Plus the legal mess, the damage to a company's reputation, it's immense.
It really is. And that's where ethical hacking provides real, tangible value. It's about stopping those nightmares before they start.
And sometimes it's not even just a good idea, right? It's required.
Precisely. In many sectors, regular security testing isn't optional. It's mandated by regulations. Think about industries handling sensitive info.
Like healthcare with IPA.
Yep, HIPA.
Yeah.
Or finance PCI DSS, GDPR over in Europe. These often require regular vulnerability assessments and penetration testing.
So it's compliance too.
Compliance is a big driver.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond just, avoiding fines and lawsuits,
Mm.
having strong security, which ethical hacking helps validate,
Hmm.
it builds trust.
That makes sense.
Customers, partners, they're much more likely to engage with organizations they trust
Mm-hmm.
to protect their data.
Especially now. I mean, cybercrime seems to be constantly on the rise.
It really is. More sophisticated attacks, more frequent.
Hmm.
Things like ransomware are becoming scarily common.
It feels like a constant arms race, doesn't it? Bad guys find a new trick, good guys find a way to block it.
It certainly can feel that way.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why the demand for skilled ethical hackers, for cybersecurity professionals in general, is just soaring.
I saw a stat. Something crazy.
Yeah, projections suggest we could see globally something like 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs in the very near future, like by 2025.
Wow. 3.5 million.
Yeah. It really underscores not just how critical these skills are, but also the huge career opportunities that exist in this field right now.
Okay, so wrapping that part up, ethical hackers are basically the digital world's security auditors.
That's a good way to put it. Proactively working, finding and fixing weaknesses to keep our online world, well, safer.
And look, if you're someone listening who's, fascinated by technology, maybe you like solving puzzles, and you have that drive to protect against digital threats.
Then this is going to be a really compelling path.
Definitely. It seems like a really exciting and honestly rewarding career to think about. And there are different roles within it too, right? It's not just one job title.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Several key roles. You got the penetration tester, often called a pen tester.
Okay, what do they do? Sounds hands-on.
Very hands-on. They're the ones simulating cyber attacks, trying to breach systems, networks, applications, all to find those vulnerabilities we talked about. It's highly technical.
And the pay reflects that, I imagine.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
Average salary range.
Yeah.
You're probably looking somewhere between, say, $90,000 and $130,000, maybe more, depending on experience and location.
Not bad at all. What else?
Then there are security analysts. Their focus is a bit broader, maybe. They're monitoring security systems, looking for suspicious activity, analyzing potential threats, incident response, and developing strategies to improve the overall security posture.
So more about monitoring and strategy.
Monitoring, analysis, strategy, yeah. The salary there, on average, might range from around $70,000 up to $110,000 or so.
Still very solid. And are there roles for people who like advising, maybe?
Definitely. That would be the security consultant.
Oh.
They work with different organizations, assessing their specific security needs, recommending solutions, helping them implement best practices, maybe helping with compliance. It's more strategic, client-facing often.
And the compensation for that?
That's be quite good too.
Yeah.
Average salary range, perhaps $80,000 to $140,000. Again, the
That-
variables apply,
Right. Experience, location.
always. And one more we should probably mention, bug bounty hunters.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those. That sounds different.
It is a bit different. These are often independent researchers. They
Yeah.
find vulnerabilities in software or websites, often through specific programs set up by companies.
And they get paid for finding bugs.
Exactly. They report the bug responsibly to the company, and if it's valid, they get a reward, a bounty.
How much can someone make doing that?
It varies wildly.
Yeah.
It really depends on the severity of the bugs you find, how many you find, which programs you work with. Some top researchers make a very substantial income,
Yeah.
but it's less predictable than a salaried role.
More like freelance hacking for good.
Kind of, yeah. It requires a lot of skill and persistence.
So quite a few options then. Whether you like the deep technical challenge of pen testing
Or the analytical side of being a security analyst.
or the strategic advisory role of a consultant.
Or even that independent challenge of bug bounties.
Right. There are diverse paths, and clearly they're in high demand. It seems like a field that really blends technical skill with a strong sense of ethics.
That's crucial. The ethical responsibility is huge. You have the skills to break things, but you use them to build security instead.
Definitely some food for thought there. If you're looking for a challenging career where you can really make a tangible difference in protecting our digital lives, this seems like a space worth exploring further. Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're tackling ethical hacking. That's the practice of intentionally and crucially, legally breaking into computer systems and networks.
Exactly. Our goal with this exploration is to really get a handle on what ethical hacking involves, why it's become just so vital in, well, today's digital world, and sort of unpack its different sides for you.
And our main source for this, it's a really interesting discussion from Cyber Talks called Ethical Hacking, Guardians of the Digital Realm. Gives us a great place to start.
It's a solid piece.
So over the next little while, we're going to dig into, the definition, make it clear how it's different from malicious hacking,
The illegal stuff, yeah.
why it's so important, touch on the legal and ethical lines, which seem pretty key.
Oh, absolutely critical.
Look at the common methods they use, some real-world examples, and even check out potential career paths. Okay, so let's unpack this first bit. Fundamentally, what is ethical hacking?
Right. So at its heart, ethical hacking is the legal and deliberate attempt to breach computer systems networks. The emphasis is really on legal. These are cybersecurity professionals, often called white hat hackers.
Oh, white hats.
Yeah, and they're hired by organizations specifically to proactively find weaknesses.
So white hats, basically, the good guys looking for the problems before the bad guys, the black hats, can use them.
Precisely.
Right.
They essentially mimic the tactics, the techniques a cybercriminal might use.
Yeah.
But, and this is the important part, with explicit authorization.
Right, they have permission.
Exactly. This lets them find vulnerabilities in a controlled way.
Yeah.
And that CyberTalks piece mentions their activities include things like penetration testing, so actively trying to exploit weaknesses.
Like a real attack simulation.
Yeah. And vulnerability assessments, finding and ranking weaknesses, and also risk analysis, figuring out the potential impact of those flaws.
Okay, so the white hats are authorized troubleshooters, basically, looking for trouble to prevent bigger trouble. That leads us nicely to the difference between white hats and black hats. It sounds like the main thing is just intent and legality.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's the core difference. White hat hackers operate totally legally
Right.
with the aim of improving security, making things stronger.
Okay.
Black hat hackers, they act illegally. Their intentions are harmful, stealing data, causing chaos, maybe just making money illicitly.
Right, pretty stark contrast there. But, the source also mentioned gray hat hackers.
Mhm.
That sounds a bit fuzzy.
It is. It's definitely a blurred line. Gray hat hackers might access systems without getting permission first,
Okay.
but their goal isn't usually malicious. They might just want to show off a vulnerability, maybe report it afterwards.
So kind of like, look what I found, but without asking first.
Exactly. But, and this is crucial, as the source material points out, even if their intentions aren't bad, what they're doing is still illegal in most jurisdictions. So the ethics are, well, they're questionable, regardless of intent.
Interesting. So still, probably best to avoid that path. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Why does ethical hacking actually matter so much? It feels like more than just, a techie cat and mouse game.
Oh, absolutely. It's vital for what we call proactive security. By finding these vulnerabilities before the bad guys do, companies can prevent potentially massive data breaches, huge financial losses, serious damage to their reputation. It's all about fixing weaknesses before they get exploited.
Proactive defense. That makes a lot of sense. You're not just waiting for something bad to happen and then reacting.
Exactly.
The cyber talks discussion also mentioned compliance. How does ethical hacking fit in there?
Right. Well, many industries have really strict rules about data protection and security. Think about standards like HIPAA for healthcare information, PCI DSS for credit card data, GDPR for general data privacy in Europe and beyond. These often require regular security testing.
So ethical hacking helps companies tick those boxes?
Precisely. Practices like penetration testing and vulnerability assessments directly help organizations meet these compliance requirements and, just as importantly, avoid some pretty hefty fines and penalties.
Okay, so it's about security and legal necessity. Now, you mentioned cost savings earlier. Can you elaborate on that? How does spending money on ethical hacking save money?
Certainly. Look, the financial fallout from a serious data breach can be staggering. You've got potential fines, legal fees, the cost of notifying everyone affected, maybe credit monitoring.
Right.
And then there's the hit to the company's image, lost business, lost trust. It adds up incredibly fast. Investing in ethical hacking upfront to prevent these incidents is almost always way more cost-effective in the long run.
Billions of dollars, potentially, right, for a big breach.
Easily. Some studies show average costs running into the millions for large organizations. That's a cost. Proactive ethical hacking can help dodge.
And that reputation piece feels huge, too. People want to trust companies with their data. Strong security must build that trust.
Exactly right. In today's world, security isn't just an IT issue. It's a major factor in customer trust and loyalty. Companies that show they're serious about security, maybe through things like ethical hacking programs, they tend to keep customers and attract new ones. The CyberTalks piece really stressed how strong security boosts reputation.
Yeah, and we hear constantly about cybercrime getting worse, data breaches, ransomware attacks. It feels relentless sometimes. Where do ethical hackers fit into this rising tide of threats?
They're really on the front lines of that digital battle. As cybercrime gets more common, more sophisticated, the need for skilled people who can actually think like an attacker, who can spot those vulnerabilities, that need becomes absolutely critical.
So they're kind of the first line of digital defense.
You could definitely say that. They're working to protect individuals, companies, even critical infrastructure from all sorts of malicious online activity.
And it sounds like we need more of them. The CyberTalk source mentioned a pretty big gap in cybersecurity jobs.
Yeah, a huge one. Cybersecurity Ventures predicts something like 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs globally by 2025.
Wow, 3.5 million.
It's a massive number.
Yeah.
It just underscores how fast the demand for these skills, including ethical hacking expertise, is growing. It's not just vital work, it's a field with enormous opportunity.
Okay, so ethical hacking, clearly essential, clearly in demand. But let's talk about the hacking part again. The legal and ethical side must be incredibly important. You can't just, start poking around systems, even if you mean well.
You've absolutely nailed a critical point there.
Right.
Legality and ethics are, well, they're everything in ethical hacking. Without that strong ethical compass and strict legal boundaries, the whole practice just becomes indistinguishable from the criminal activities trying to stop.
So what are the main things ethical hackers absolutely need to keep front and center, legally and ethically?
Okay, first and foremost, explicit written permission, always, before any testing, any probing starts. Without that formal authorization, even just scanning for vulnerabilities could be illegal. The cybertalks discussion was really clear on the need for that consent.
Written permission. Got it. What else?
Second, they have to operate within the law. In the U.S., that primarily means the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the CFAA. Other countries have similar anti-hacking laws. Breaking these, serious legal trouble.
Right. Makes sense. Stay within the law, get permission first. What about the ethical guidelines? Are there codes they follow?
Yes, definitely. Many well-respected cybersecurity certifications, like the CEH Certified Ethical Hacker from EC Council, they come with strict codes of ethics.
Okay.
These codes stress principles like integrity, being honest, trustworthy, confidentiality, protecting any sensitive data you come across during testing, and just overall professionalism in how they conduct their work.
It sounds like a pretty heavy responsibility. Even with permission, could things still go wrong, like accidentally breaking something? What about liability then?
That's a really valid concern.
Yeah.
Yes, even with authorized testing, there's always a chance, however small, of unintended consequences. Maybe a system crashes, maybe data gets corrupted accidentally.
Right.
This is exactly why detailed contracts and very clear scopes of engagement are so vital. These documents spell out precisely what testing is allowed, what the limits are, what systems are off limits, and who's responsible if something does go wrong unintentionally.
So the paperwork really matters.
Absolutely. The CyberTalk source pointed out that without these clear agreements, both the ethical hacker and the company hiring them could face legal liability if unintended damage occurs.
So it's definitely not just about having the technical chops. You need a solid grasp of the legal and ethical landscape, too. Okay, let's switch to the practical side. How do ethical hackers actually do what they do? What are some common methods they use to find these vulnerabilities?
Right, so they have a whole toolkit of methodologies. A
Mhm.
major one is penetration testing or pen testing, which we touched on.
Mhm.
This is where they actively simulate real-world cyber attacks to see if they can exploit weaknesses.
Pen testing. Sounds very active. Are there different flavors of that?
Yes, definitely. It often depends on how much information the tester gets beforehand. You've got black box testing.
A box.
Yeah, where the tester basically knows nothing about the target system beforehand.
Okay.
They're coming at it like a complete outsider, an external attacker.
Okay.
Then there's white box testing. That's the opposite. The tester gets full access, documentation, source code maybe. It simulates, say, an insider threat or someone who already has deep knowledge.
Gotcha. Black box is outside in, white box is inside out.
Exactly. And then there's gray box testing, which is somewhere in the middle. The tester has some partial knowledge, maybe user-level access. It blends the internal and external views.
So different approaches to get different perspectives on weaknesses. What else besides actively trying to break in?
Another key method is vulnerability assessment. This is a bit different from pen testing. It's more about systematically scanning systems to identify and categorize potential security weaknesses based on risk level.
So less about exploiting the flaws and more about just finding and listing them.
Primarily, yes. Vulnerability assessments aim to discover and document potential flaws so the organization can prioritize fixing them. Pen testing often follows up to see if those discovered flaws are actually exploitable.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, CyberTalks also mentions social engineering. That sounds like it's less about the tech and more about people.
Exactly right. Social engineering targets the human element. It exploits trust, maybe curiosity, sometimes fear, or just a lack of security awareness to trick people into giving up information or access.
That sounds sneaky. What kind of tactics do ethical hackers use here to test the human defenses, I mean?
Well, common examples include things like phishing, sending deceptive emails designed to trick someone into clicking a bad link or giving up their login details.
We all get those, yeah.
Right. Then there's pretexting, basically creating a believable fake story or scenario to gain someone's trust and get information. Or baiting, leaving something tempting, like a malware-loaded USB stick labeled payroll info in the parking lot to see if someone plugs it in.
Wow. So the goal there for the ethical hacker is to see how vulnerable the staff are to these tricks.
Exactly. It's about assessing and helping improve employee awareness and security training. It really highlights that security isn't just firewalls and software. People are a huge part of it.
That's a great point. Okay, to make all this more real, let's talk about some actual examples. The CyberTalks discussion had a few case studies.
Yeah, these really show the practical impact. Let's start with that e-commerce platform one.
Right, the SQL injection vulnerability. What happened there?
Okay, so in that case, ethical hackers were hired to test an online retailer's website. They found a flaw, specifically in SQL injection vulnerability, in the login page.
And that means
That means an attacker could potentially manipulate the login form to bypass authentication and maybe even gain access to the entire customer database. Millions of user records, names, addresses, possibly payment info could have been exposed.
oof, that's bad. So, what was the outcome?
Well, the good news is, because the ethical hackers found it first and reported it responsibly, the company was able to fix the vulnerability, to patch it, before any real attackers discovered it.
Phew. So, they prevented a massive data breach and all the PR nightmare that comes with it.
Exactly. A clear win for proactive security.
Definitely. What about the second case, the financial institution?
Right. In that scenario, a large financial institution brought in ethical hackers to do a thorough review of their internal network.
Okay, what did they find?
They uncovered several pretty significant issues. Things like running outdated server software that was missing critical security patches,
Oh.
finding systems still using default administrator passwords that had never been changed.
Wow, really?
Yep. And employees using weak, easy-to-guess passwords, kind of basic security hygiene stuff, but easily overlooked in a complex environment.
So, what happened after the ethical hackers pointed these out?
The institution took action. They updated the software, enforced much stronger password policies across the board, changed all those default credentials. It significantly hardened their internal defenses against attack.
It just shows how even fundamental things can get missed. Okay, the last case study was about critical infrastructure. That sounds particularly important.
It really is. This involved an operator of a power grid hiring ethical hackers to stress test their systems.
Testing the power grid, what did they find there?
The team discovered some worrying things. Unsecured remote access points that could potentially allow attackers to gain control over essential systems. They also found vulnerabilities in the specific protocols used to manage the industrial control systems, the ICS, that actually run the grid.
Yikes. The potential for damage there is enormous. So what was the impact of the ethical hacking?
By finding these critical flaws, the power grid operator could take immediate steps to secure those remote access points and patch the vulnerable ICS protocols. This directly improved the security and resilience of the energy system, protecting not just the infrastructure, but potentially public safety as well.
Wow. These examples really drive home that ethical hacking isn't just theoretical, it prevents real harm.
Absolutely. They show the tangible value across different sectors.
Okay, so for listeners who might be thinking, wow, this sounds interesting, maybe even as a career, what are some paths people take within ethical hacking?
Well, there are several really interesting and, as we said, in-demand roles. A
Hmm.
very common one is penetration tester or pen tester.
Right, we talked about pen testing.
Exactly. These are the folks who simulate the attacks, find the holes. It's very hands-on, very technical. The CyberTalks piece mentioned average salaries in the range of $90,000 to $130,000 a year. So good compensation for specialized skills.
Definitely sounds challenging but rewarding. What other roles are there?
Another key role is security analyst. These professionals are more focused on monitoring security systems, looking for anomalies, investigating potential incidents, and recommending improvements. Their salary range, according to the source, was around $70,000 to $110,000 annually.
So, more on the monitoring and response side, what if someone's more into strategy or advising?
Then a path as a security consultant might be a good fit. Consultants advise organizations on security best practices, help develop policies, design secure architectures. It's more strategic. The salary range there was mentioned as roughly $80,000 to $140,000, depending on experience.
Interesting. And the source also mentioned bug bounty hunters. That sounds a bit different.
Yeah, that's a less traditional route, but increasingly popular. Bug bounty hunters are often independent researchers. They find vulnerabilities in companies' systems or software and report them through established bug bounty programs.
And they get paid for finding bugs.
Exactly. Companies offer rewards or bounties for validated vulnerabilities, especially critical ones. The payouts can be quite substantial sometimes. It's not always a full-time gig for everyone. Earnings can vary a lot, but some people make a very good living doing it.
So, it seems like there's a pretty diverse range of options, whether you like breaking things, analyzing things, advising people, or hunting for bugs independently.
Absolutely. They all center around that core mission, though, protecting the digital world.
Right.
It offers a chance to really make a difference in keeping data and systems secure.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive into ethical hacking. If you had boil it down, what's the main takeaway for you?
I think the central message is that ethical hacking isn't some obscure dark art. It's a crucial, legitimate, and rapidly growing field. It's absolutely essential for proactively securing our digital lives. These white hat hackers, by thinking like the attackers but acting ethically and legally, they really are guardians of our digital realm.
Guardians of the digital realm. I like that. It's definitely a field worth looking into more for anyone interested in tech and security. So, as you think about everything we've discussed today, here's something to mull over. Consider that constant push and pull, that dynamic between the ever-evolving sophistication of cyber threats and the ingenuity of the people working tirelessly to defend against them. It's a perpetual challenge, isn't it, in this incredibly connected world we live in? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.